Okay, so this is one of those rare stories that is actually interesting because it's sort of a break in an aberration from the consistent, boring, same old this, that politics and the same thing over and over again, literally every day. So Anna Kasparian got swarmed on Twitter. So you may be thinking, oh, it's probably, Jimmy George and his fans or, maybe some conservatives or whatever. But it's actually none of those people. She's actually getting swarmed by local news people, local weathermen, meteorologists, fans of local weather and local news, because she actually decided to send out a tweet saying, blows my mind that local news still does weather. What are you guys doing? I can look up the 7-day forecast on my phone. And so this is actually pretty interesting because it goes to talk about a kind of different issue of, local weather, local news in general, and then also the weather portion of it. I guess local weather news is like the most watched of the local news. And a lot of people make fun of local news in general, which I'm not really sure why. I mean, local news is very important. So I'm not sure why people make fun of local news like that. I don't know. But she got absolutely swarmed for this take by so many people. And it mostly is coming from people who are these local news people or their local weather weather people, weathermen or whatever. And they're people who are getting mad at this because this is actually threatening their livelihood, right? They worked for this job that used to be something that was very valued in a time where you didn't have smartphones and stuff like that that can easily give you the information. And so their job is threatened by this tweet. Their whole livelihood is threatened by this tweet. It's kind of like, it would be like making fun of, this is going to be an analogy that's not perfect, but it would kind of be something like, you know, saying, why would you hire someone to scissor cut your grass instead of, a lawnmower, or hiring someone to use a lawnmower? It doesn't make sense. I think this would be considered structural unemployment because, new technology and smartphones is making their jobs obsolete. So in economics, I believe this would be considered structural unemployment. But some of these tweets, this guy, Pat Kavlin, he's a meteorologist at some local news outlet. He says, the best time to delete this tweet was the moment you sent it. The second best time is now. Of course, their work and their job, their whole livelihood is under threat, and their whole, everything they do, they put work into is really, it's, in jeopardy, essentially. This comment says, my dad watches the Weather Channel, and I don't mean he checks on the weather. He'll make a snack, sit down, and watch it. Used to laugh at him, but the older I get, the more I understand it. And there are a bunch of other tweets. Big Rick Radio, of course, like it's another, local news outlet, which I don't want to make fun of local news men or people who work in local news or whatever. I don't want to do that. This is an example of pure ignorance for local media, how we serve our communities. Delete your account. I think that local news is actually very important, plays a huge important role for sure. Here's an interesting one. So this is another meteorologist in Kentucky, WPSD Local 6. Noah says, yeah, this may be true in your little bubble of LA and Southern California, but otherwise you are just wrong. In fact, ratings growth continues in local media for weather and is the number one reason why people still do watch. So this here, right here, doesn't really make sense in terms of if ratings growth is continuing in local media for weather. I mean, she's questioning why they're doing that. So you're just kind of repeating what she said, essentially. So that statement is just null. I don't know what he's trying to argue here. But also want to kind of challenge this idea of California just being like this perfect bubble where it's just sunny every day and it's just beautiful. Now Southern California is different. I'm not in Southern California. But, here now, especially the weather is getting really bad. You have a really bad fog that happens oftentimes where it's actually straight up like dangerous to drive in. So you have to look for like fog alerts. Sometimes there are like dry weather alerts where it's like in this area it's extremely dry. Watch out. There could easily be a fire ignited. You have literal fires that happen in the summer where, like I've had to evacuate my house before just a couple years ago because there was a fire pretty close by. And so every summer it's like that. Just this past summer, it was like 108 degrees or something like that. And this kind of tangles into the talk about the weather app. I look at the weather very frequently because you want to tell how windy it is, if you're going to play basketball outside or, that kind of thing. And so in the summer one time, it was really hot outside. It was like 108 or 104. I can't remember which one it was. And it was hot as fuck. And there was nobody outside. And I'm like, why is there no one outside? So I opened my weather app. and it says it's like 104 or 108, and it says like National Weather Service alert, like it's extremely hot, stay inside. And I had like read about reports about people who are outside in the heat, like just spontaneously like fainting or something like that, or even dying. And I was like, what the fuck? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna leave. I'm not gonna play basketball in this weather. It's this bad. And so you get the National Weather Service alert, you get the predictions for the weather, you get all of this kind of stuff. So you do get a lot of what you used to get from that. And California is not just some perfect, it's sunny every day. It's been, um, it's completely off whack. You get crazy fog events. You get insane wind, like massive winds. You get every summer, like your house could be burnt down. Even like recently with the raining, like it was raining so hard, it was like kind of like flooding. And so some houses got flooded straight up from the rain because it was just coming so fucking hard. So just keep that in mind about California. It's not the weather dream that you may be thinking of. Now, am I saying California is on the same level of like an Oklahoma or Kentucky or something like that? No, I'm not going to say that. They obviously have much worse catastrophic events. And so the assertion that people are making is for those extreme weather events, it makes sense for these weathermen because they can tell you what's going on and give you more information about it. Now, what weathermen can break down the weather in a more analyzed way than you can, just like a sort of maybe a political scientist would be able to break down a political theory or a political idea or explanation, or just like any analyst of any sort of specialty would be able to do for you. And so it's important to have those specialists that you can go to really understand what it is that the information is saying. It's one thing to have the information, but to really understand what the information is, you usually do need some kind of like specialist analysis to understand it. That's why you can go to an economist to kind of understand, why is stagflation happening or something like that, And so that's what a lot of these people are saying. But there were a ton of responses, lots and lots of people who are local media workers, and so their job is in jeopardy. It says, I feel like your comment is rather classist. Not everyone has access to a smartphone or a cable subscription to access the weather channel. Local meteorologists can have insight into an area that an app just won't have. So, there are probably maybe older people that don't have smartphones that need local media. Maybe, possibly. I guess that is possible to have a TV and local news, but not a smartphone. So that I guess could be, one thing. So I think that there is, some important stuff that local news plays and even local weather news. But this is definitely sort of like an identity crisis. And, check this out. I mean, this got so big that a meteorologist wrote an article in the Washington Post. An article was written in the Washington Post in response to this, because this is actually it's actually a really sort of big question that you have to ask about this, because it's like, okay, is the weatherman job going out of style? It used to be something that was very cool. Everybody watched, everybody needed, especially for the old culture, weather, watching the Weather Channel or the weather news on the local news channel was very, very important. But that's starting to die out now, just like we've seen, DVD rental stores go out of business and Netflix coming in, all of this stuff. And so this happens all the time as technology builds, previous jobs are taken out. And so now you have to question, is there any value to these people's jobs? This is a structural unemployment issue, potentially, right? These people could lose their jobs. And so you're questioning, okay, I have the weather forecast on my iPhone. I would say the phone does give you a lot of information, just even like the Apple iPhone weather app. I mean, it tells you like national weather service alerts. You can read them, gives you the forecast, tell you the wind. Also, another thing I didn't mention before in the shitty things about California weather, for long periods of time, there's insane amounts of smoke in the air. And so anytime you'll look at like the air quality, it'll be unhealthy, or it'll be unhealthy for, at-risk groups. And so that's another thing you have to, be careful of. It's like, oh, okay, well, I have to check, is the weather, is, the air quality shit, and is the air quality going to get worse? I had to deal with that a lot back in the fall time, around the fall time-ish. Last year, and so it was just really, really, really terrible. And that is definitely one thing that you also have to, something else that I forgot. But yeah, so this person, talking about it, this person is somebody who's a meteorologist themselves. And so, this guy says, I had my own reaction to it too. In addition to writing articles for the Washington Post, I work as an on-air meteorologist at DC Fox affiliate WTTG for a well-known app in Florida called My Radar, and as a freelancer for a number of other radio and TV outlets. Becoming a television meteorologist had been my dream since childhood. And so this is the thing, right? Like, this is something that was heavily valued in society before, especially in America, the weather guy or the weather woman, and saying the new, breaking down the weather, the local weather and all that stuff. Like, it's something very valued, but it's starting to die out because people now have weather apps, but older people are living longer now, and so those older people are not dying out as fast as they would before. So there is still some demand going on for this kind of local weather news. Most likely, there's going to be a heavy correlation of the older you are, the more likely you are to watch the weather news on the local news channel, or if there's a weather channel, you might watch that. But generally speaking, there's high correlation. The younger you are, the much less likely you are to be watching it, right? You're more likely to look on your phone, the weather app. But this guy actually says, it may surprise you that I don't think Kasparian is wrong in questioning the value that local meteorologists provide in comparison with weather apps, at least on most days of the year when weather is non-life threatening. Kasparian certainly could have phrased her tweet differently or exhibited better understanding of what TV meteorologists do, but there's some truth to the uncomfortable point she's making. Weather apps do a big part of what has historically been a local meteorologist's job. Local TV meteorologists for years have defiantly pointed to the output of weather apps as being of poor quality, stating that human forecasts were irreplaceable. That remains true. Local TV meteorologists have enormous forecast value, but weather apps are becoming pretty darn good, and in an era that features machine learning, it won't be long before weather models and apps eclipse the abilities of human forecasters. Nowadays, we even get wireless emergency alerts delivered to our phones that can wake us up and tell us to seek shelter. Then what? As it is, local TV meteorologists are facing an identity crisis of sorts. You'll need us if there's a tornado. Only works, once or twice a year? We need to give viewers a better reason to tune in for the other 363 or whatever days a year. This is especially true for younger audiences who are not in the habit of tuning into local news their parents and grandparents do. He also says, besides, weather apps can make down-to-the-mile predictions for a user's neighborhood, something is impractical and virtually impossible in the context of a 2-minute, 45-second weather forecast. I grew up on Cape Cod, and although we were in the Boston TV market, Boston TV forecasts most certainly didn't apply. The apps beat local TV the majority of the time. Local TV meteorologists can't expect to survive just standing in front of numbers, panels, and daypart graphics. That's like just narrating what the app produces. Viewers don't need someone standing and pointing at the same thing their phone can spit out. Sure, the forecast from your local TV station might be 5 or even 10% better than that of a high-quality weather app, but odds are viewers won't notice the difference. And so he's basically saying that, like, the only way for these people to survive is for them to offer something different, right? And so this kind of any job or any work that you have, if you can offer something different, if you're a political commentator and maybe you're faster at delivering the news to people, that is a way that you can, outbeat your opponents. Or maybe if your job is, being finished, you can continue to survive. Maybe you're more entertaining. Maybe people really enjoy watching you, even though you're getting the same or maybe even a bit less information. And so that's just kind of the way it is. And so he's saying, they need to become, and generally speaking, I would say whether people are generally, trying to be very charismatic, interesting, and really draw your attention. They're really trying to do that already. And so that's what he's trying to do. You could make the argument that because of climate change and, all this horrible shit that I've been telling you that's been happening with California weather, which has been nowhere this bad, like 10 years ago, nowhere close. But with climate change continuing to accelerate pretty rapidly, you're going to need, that might bring a demand or a necessity for local TV meteorologists, right? But they definitely can provide an analysis on what the numbers are. You can really rarely look at a piece of information and really understand it without an analysis of somebody who actually knows that field or what's going on in there. That's why you have political science experts, economists who are experts in economics, et cetera, et cetera. So there's definitely a need for it. I think weather is extremely important. And so I don't believe that local TV meteorologists are just a waste or anything like that. I think weather is very important. I believe that even if it's something like seeing what the weather conditions are in terms of what is the air quality. That really impacts people in general. People's lungs are getting worse and worse in health from inhaling the smoke in the air in California, for example. So if you know what the air quality is and you're planning to go outside to play basketball, but you saw the air quality, you decide I'm not going to, that's saving lives and prolonging lives, etc. And especially in areas like Oklahoma and areas like that where there's just crazy shit going on, that is definitely very helpful for sure. To have TV meteorologists, you can also get forecasts for, okay, this is coming here. Let me break it all down for you. Whereas in an app, you'll get important information. You'll certainly get like the important pieces, right? But you won't get the full breakdown. And so I still think that there's a need for what they do for sure, especially like I said, as climate change is going to continue to accelerate, their job is probably going to be in even higher demand. They might be making a comeback, if anything, right? And so I think local news is also important. I don't devalue local news. I think local news is very important because there's important stuff happening in people's communities, and it's important for people to know about what's going on in their community. It's important for people to be aware of weather. Being aware of the weather is like life-saving or life-prolonging, like I said about the air quality, for example. If you know it's about to be so foggy that it's dangerous to drive, maybe you decide to stay home that day and don't get in a car crash, right? So these are very, very important things, and I think that they're still important, but they're certainly dying off. And like Matthew Capucci says, the apps are getting pretty damn good. And so the demand for local TV meteorologists will certainly go down, of course, just as structural unemployment and technology advancing, but it's not going to completely go extinct, right? It's not going to go completely extinct. So this is a very interesting conversation to see. A lot of weather people getting very angry because their jobs are threatened. But an interesting, nuanced dialogue, I would say. But I still think that meteorologists, weather people's jobs, local news jobs are still important. And I think that they will continue to persist in this situation.